Hello, my quilting friends. My name is Leah Day, and welcome to the Eternal Love Quilt Along. We're going to be making this beautiful goddess quilt step by step together. And the very first step is to prepare your fusible web and cut out your fabrics. So let's get started learning how to work with fusible web together. So here is the Eternal Love quilt pattern, and I've printed it out, and the pages that you need for fusing are pages 11 through 18. These are your full-size templates, so that way we can easily cut out the shapes that we need to. Okay, so the very first thing that you have to do is double check this 1-inch box. And really, if you're unsure about your printer settings, only print out page 11 and then place your ruler on top of it and just double check. Kind of put it right in the center and make sure that 1-inch box measures exactly 1 inch. Even if it's just a little under like 7/8 of an inch, you might be tempted to, keep on moving with it. That's going to imply that your page has been resized or shrunken by your computer. That's not going to work. You want to make sure that it's exactly 1 inch right there. And a few tips on that: make sure your printer is set to actual size, so it's going to print actual size. And I have been having trouble printing any PDF from anything other than Adobe Reader, so also double check that and make sure that it's up to date. All of those things can definitely play a role. Okay, so this is pretty simple. All we're going to do is just place the fusible web on top of the page and then trace the shapes. And I like to use a black micron Pigma pen. I like this because it doesn't streak, and also when you hit it with an iron, which we're going to have to, it also doesn't spread and kind of mush around. So for that reason, I really like it. Now we're going to have a few pages like this one. Let's actually trace this one together. So this is page 13, and we have in the pattern completely, we have 4 shapes that are going to have to be combined together. And so I want to show you how to do that. So this is number 23A. So I'm going to position it here running diagonally because I know this shape's going to be fairly long. So I want to make sure I have more than enough room for it. So I'm going to go with 23A, and I'm just going to trace that shape onto the freezer paper and try and be as smooth about this as you can be. And we're also going to be transferring all of the marks, all of the information that I've put on the pattern onto the I keep saying freezer paper because that's what I'm used to using. This is fusible web, onto the fusible web too. We want to get all of these marks in place so that way we'll be able to really easily put the applique shape together. So I'm just going to take a minute here to trace all of these lines, and I'll meet you back here when we're ready to put on the other side. Okay, so I have transferred all of the information on this particular shape. So this is 23A. I've written down fabric E. You see I have transferred all of those little marks all over, including that little dashed line. You need to have all of that information on your piece because without it, you will not be able to connect the applique together. Okay, so 23B is on the same page. And what we do here is we just simply line up. You've got like a double line here and then double line going in the other direction. What that implies is those butt up together just exactly with one another, and then the shape just continues. So this is the way that you're going to handle. It's 4 different pieces that were just too long to fit on the page, and that's why we have to do it this way. So there we go. I've just added the other half of 23. So we've got 23A and 23B. And then now I just want to look out for any hash marks, any little red marks on that piece that I need to transfer over. But that looks really good. So we've got 4 split shapes like that. It's 23, 27. We have number 14 is also split, and number 30. And you can just refer to your quilt pattern to see all those shapes and make sure you get them set up correctly. And this is exactly how you want to do that. Draw half the shape, get all of the information, and then line up those double lines, and that's how you're going to transfer and get it all connected together. Okay, so now the next step is to trace another shape. What we want to do basically is max out how much we can fit on our freezer paper. but we don't want to squeeze these too tightly together. See how I could just really get those almost on top of one another? We don't want that. We need at least 1/2 of an inch of space between one shape and another. And if you're getting too close to the edges, that can be a problem too. Like if I brought this way over close to the edge, you're going to need at least 1/4 inch all around the shape in order to have enough room. So really something like that would be about right. So that's how I would arrange it. So that way I know I have plenty of extra fusible web that goes all the way around these shapes, and then transfer it in. And then of course you're going to transfer all of the marks too. The most important marks are these little red dash marks, because what that does is that's actually helping you line up and connect one piece to another. The other thing that's really important is the dashed lines. Those dashed lines are important because that's going to tell you where you need to cut and leave extra fabric extending, so that way your shapes will nicely overlap one another. And if that's a little confusing or you don't understand what I'm talking about, don't worry, we're going to get into that later. So there we go. So as you can see, this is going to take a little while. Oh, make sure not to forget to write down what fabric and what number it is. I mean, of course, you can always go back and reference it, but it'll just save you some time to go on ahead and write that down. Okay, so what's the next step, and is there any way that we could make this a little faster? Because obviously this is going to be a lot of hand tracing, pretty slow, one shape at a time, and we've got a total of, I think, 33 shapes in this quilt. So that could be pretty time consuming pretty quick. So there is a shortcut, and I will be honest, it does waste a little bit of fusible web. So long as you don't mind that too much, then this is the better option for you. So basically what I did is I took the fusible web sheets, stuck them in my inkjet printer, and I made sure to print out this page as a test. First, this is page 11. Double and triple checked my printer settings were correct to give me that 1-inch box in the corner. And then I printed it out. Now you see how much fusible web that's being wasted here, and it's a lot. However, all of the marks are in place, the dashed lines are in place, the red lines are in place, every piece is labeled, every piece is numbered. So this is going to save you a lot of time. So you can always do it this way. You might have to play with your printer just a little bit, or you might have to cut down your pages. These are 9 by 12-inch pages, which is bigger than the standard, sheet of paper that we have in the United States. So your printer might be a little funky on it, so just play around with it and see if this is going to be possible for you. If anything, you can always cut your fusible web sheets down to the correct size before printing it. But again, you'll want to print it so it's on the printed side of the fusible web. See, this side doesn't have any of the yellow marks on it. And this just saves you a lot of time. It really, really does. So at this point, I'm going to start cutting out my shapes, and we're going to do this leaving that 1/4 inch all the way around. So I'm going to start out with these really itsy bitsy tiny shapes just to show you what I mean. And in fact, actually with these, I'm just going to leave them together and just cut down a little bit of that fusible web, but that's as much as I'm going to cut those down. Okay, and then now I can cut out between all of these pieces. So the excess fusible web, the point of leaving this in place and having so much overlapping is so that way whenever we cut out our shapes, we have more than enough fabric to go around. And that's really helpful. It's also good because we want fusible web going all the way to the cut edge of the fabric. That helps to stop it from fraying badly. So you might want to do just a rough cut out all the way around. Kind of get all this excess paper out of the way. And please, please, please make sure that you are using an inkjet printer for this. Any kind of laser printer is going to heat up And that heat will, of course, react with the glue, and it will melt into your printer. And I once printed onto freezer paper sheets, and I broke Josh's printer completely. It was a laser printer, and he loved it, and I felt really bad. So yeah, make sure that you're printing only on an inkjet printer for this job. Okay, so you can see how I'm just really roughly cutting these shapes out. I'm not being picky. I'm not being too particular with this, but I am being careful to leave a lot of space all the way around in the fusible web. And another thing that you can start to do is make piles with the matching fabric colors. So all of these are fabric A. That's going to be your skin tone fabric. So you want to make a pile of each different color, and that's going to make it easier whenever you go to start pressing this onto your fabric. And the nice thing is I've also roughly organized, I've kept the pieces organized by color too. So that way you can, as you're cutting out each one, pay attention to that, but pretty much whatever page you've printed will have usually all of one color on it. So this is page 12, has all fabric Ds. This page has all fabric E's. Actually, there's 2 pages of fabric E's. There's a whole lot of that hair color. Fabric F. Here we've got 1 fabric F and G, so you can see how I put that together. Okay, so another thing you might be wondering about is those split pieces. How do we deal with that when it comes time to put your pattern together? And there's 2 sides of it. You could transfer it the same way that I just showed you and just trace those shapes yourself. But I was thinking about this, and I think what will work, and we're going to kind of experiment with this together. I think a cool way of making this work and not having to do any tracing, you can cut this out, and you see where we have that double line? Where you have that double line, cut that out exactly on that line. We're not going to have any overlap there. And what we can do is whenever we get to the quilt and we're putting this fabric and we're fusing this onto the fabric, what we'll do is we'll have both of those areas cut out cleanly, butt them up together, and that's how we will fuse that fabric. So this is a little bit different from the instructions in the pattern. I'm experimenting, I'm trying something new, but I really think that this is going to work. You don't really want the fusible web to overlap. You'll probably get a noticeable line in the quilt, so I think by butting up those pieces and you have fusible web coming right up to it on both sides, I think that's going to be just fine. So yeah, we're going to experiment with that and learn together, definitely. So I've already started the process of fusing my pieces onto the different fabrics, and you can see you don't actually end up using all that much fabric. The reason why I have called for a fat quarter or a 1/4 of a yard for each color is just in case you mess up, or if you want to make another one, that's helpful too. But it is easy to have errors and things crop up with applique. That's why I really wanted to make sure you had more than enough fabric to go around. And you're also going to end up with a little bit of extra fusible web, and this is good because every once in a while I find the piece doesn't peel off the right way. So here is the face that I had printed, and when I went to pull it off, the fusible web was sticking to the plain paper, the paper that had not been printed. And so I tried to stick it back together again and pull from the other side, but you can see what the glue did. It just pulled up and made this really weird mess. So that's what you don't want. So just in case something happens with your piece, please know that you can always trace it, you can always cut out a new shape, and that's going to work just fine too. Okay, it's never a lot of fun to know that you have a pattern that's just really particular and you can't make a single mistake. That's just really stressful, and that's not what quilting is supposed to be about. Okay, so here we go. This is fabric F, this beautiful Island Batik waterfall, and this is our last color that we need to fuse, or the last one that I need to fuse. So the first step is just to arrange everything generally and get it where you like it, and you can pay attention to your fabrics. If there's any kind of design that you really want to emphasize, then kind of pay attention to that a little bit as you're placing your fabrics down. And of course, batiks are really the same on either side, but if your fabric has a right side or a wrong side, you need to be placing these on the wrong side. So right side down, you're putting your fusible on the wrong side of the fabric. So I like this. This is looking pretty good. And this is one of those pieces that has two parts. We have a 14A and a 14B. So we're actually going to do that one last. We'll do all of these other ones first. You know, and this is one of those things. You're going to have fabric waste. You know, it's not going to be perfect. I'm the first person to tell you that. Applique means a little bit of fabric waste, and that is not going to hurt you. There we go. That looks like a really good arrangement. Okay, so what you do is you're going to peel off the plain paper from the back side of this fusible web. And oops, yep, right there. You can feel it, whichever side is sticky, and I can already tell right there it's peeling off on the wrong side. So the fusible web was sticking to this plain piece of paper. So what I do is I flip it over, go to the opposite side, and peel from there. There we go. Now I've got the sticky, that fusible web is sticking to the right side, the side with the marks that are printed on it. And I found that it's sometimes helpful to go really slow and just very lightly tug it. And this is sticky. I mean, my finger is sticking to it as I peel this away. And if you need to, you could grab, you know, a stiletto or a toothpick or something to hang on to it and peel all the way off. Okay, so now I'm going to flip it over and go fusible web side down. Oops, I think I went with this way. It's supposed to go this way. There we go. Fusible web side down onto the wrong side of the fabric, just like that. There we go. Just smooth that out. And now I'll move on to the other piece. And with these corners, you don't need to have quite that much. I find you can clip it away, and then you probably can get things to fit it together a little bit better. But also don't be too stingy. Don't cut too close to your shape. That can make things more challenging later on. Okay, so you see again, just peeling that back, just like that. Now flip it over. And I do find, actually I think this was also, it's one of those funny things, like you get it all arranged and it looks perfect, then you peel off the web and you can't remember the way it went. So that might end up happening to you. No big deal, we've got plenty of fabric. There we go, that looks good. So there are all of our pieces for fabric F in place except for this split piece. So here's what I'm trying. I'm going to cut the fusible web right along that outer line, just along the edges that have both double lines going in one direction and double lines going in the other direction. That indicates that is a piece coming together in two parts. So let's see here. I think this is looking pretty good. I've got plenty of space for it. You know, this is one of those things you want to be careful, because if you place one piece and you've got the angle wrong, and then, you know, let's say this piece comes in and it's overlapping, then the whole thing is messed up. So, you know, this is, again, I think you can get yourself in the most trouble when you're being stingy with it. So yeah, don't do that. Give yourself a little bit of breathing room and it's going to be so much easier, and you're not going to accidentally overlap your pieces. Okay, there we go. And the nice thing is once you get one in place, you can leave it, and that can help you position the second, or the first piece. Here we go. That one's stuck down now. And nice thing is this is sticky. It's not lifting off. It's staying there. I can't shift these around. You know, once they're stuck, they're stuck. And I really like that. That's part of the reason why I really like light steam and seam too, is because it's sticky. Okay, that side's lifting off the wrong direction. So go to the other side. Carefully pull this away. Yeah, and everybody likes a different fusible web, so if you don't particularly like this kind, that's okay. You can use whatever you like, whatever you've got on hand. This just happens to be my favorite. And yeah, but no fusible web is perfect, I gotta say. There we go. That's lined up nicely. So the straight lines should be going across and vertically, so they're running perpendicular to one another, so you know that piece is nicely set up and arranged. There we go. So that is all of the pieces placed on fabric F. Now I'm taking a hot, dry iron, and this is on the max cotton setting, and I'm just running right over it. And you can see I'm not spending too much time doing this. It's probably getting hit a total of about 5 seconds or so. There we go. And so I keep it pretty light, mainly because the pieces are already sticking nicely just from the stickiness of the fusible web, so you don't really have to go real muscly with it whenever you're doing this first fuse. And in general, when you're fusing, the more you heat it, the less glue you're going to have to go around. Kind of how fusible web works is it heats up and goes sticky and fuses, and then you heat it up again whenever we're sticking everything together. And it's just there's kind of a limit to how many times you can do that before the glue starts to evaporate. So that's one of the reasons why I just do a pretty light fuse this first time around. Everything's looking really good, and that's what you want to do. Just take all of your fabrics one by one, place the pieces down, and you know which fabric, which shape goes to which fabric by what's written on the piece. So this is all fabric D, that's all the shirt fabric. Here is all of fabric G, this is our lightest hair color fabric. And here's fabric E, our darkest hair color. Okay, so we have everything fused, it's all ready to go. Now let's cut out our shapes. This is the next step. There we go. So what I'm gonna do is just go in here and roughly cut out that fabric. And yeah, if you wanted to, you could move to your cutting mat and a rotary cutter if you want to. That's perfectly fine. This is just a rough cut. We're not being precious about it, we're not being particular, and we're not cutting past the fusible web right here. So you can see I'm actually extending the fabric beyond that fusible web edge, which is already roughly a 1/4 inch, extending beyond the edge of the shape. So this is a real rough cut. And you're just getting it generally cut out of the fabric so we have just the shape and a lot less of the fabric waste all around it. So here you can see I've cut out all of my fabric E and how that's handled, just a real rough cut, all of those shapes. So there we go. And it really helps to have a bin or something that you can put everything in and keep it organized. Now you might be wondering about these two colors. We have a little square of red and a little square of black. And I'll be honest, this is the lips and the eyes for the goddess. And these are the most delicate pieces. So my best advice at this stage in the game is to peel off the fusible web. Make sure you're getting it off on the right side so it's on the side with the marks. And my best advice is to fuse this in place and then just leave it. So I'm just going to stick the eyes right there. I'm going to stick the lips in a corner too. And then I'm just going to fuse these down and then set them aside because we don't need them cut out right this second. And if you do cut them out, most likely you're going to lose them. They're so tiny. These little itsy bitsy pieces can get really easily misplaced. So I'm just going to fuse those down, and then when we're on that stage of putting the face together, that's when we'll pull those out and cut them down and get them ready to go. Okay, so I'm just going to fuse those and set them aside, and now I'll talk through how we're going to cut our shapes and get them ready to put together. And this is going to be the last step for this week. Next week we'll actually start constructing the goddess and putting her together. So you're going to look at your shape, and we have two different sets of marks. We have the straight line, that is the outline of your shape, and then we have a dashed line, and the dashed line is only going to show up in certain places. Those places where that dashed line is that indicates you need extra fabric extending along that edge. So an easy way to remember that is extra line means extra fabric. So I hope that really helps you remember that. Okay, so extra line means extra fabric. That means what I'm going to do is I am just going to clip away just a little bit. I'm just going to trim that down so it's a nice smooth edge, and that's going to be it along and through that area. Now, the area that I have just a plain straight line, no extra dash line, that area needs to be cut clean. And it really does need to be cut smoothly too. And I'm left-handed, and I'm sorry, I do kind of angle my scissors so I can see the edge of the blade. So you might not be able to see how slowly and carefully I'm cutting along that line, but you just want to take your time. This is just slow, patient work. And just trim it right up that line. Now, if you have a straight line with no extra fabric going up into
an area with extra fabric, what do? Well, generally, I think a good guide for this pattern is to just keep cutting and extend that line. So I'll just keep cutting, it goes straight off, and that works fine. When we get to the actual construction part and we're putting the goddess together, we might need to nip that, we might need to angle it more, but very rarely will you need it to extend further out this way. So that looks good to me. Now you might notice by this point your scissors getting just a little sticky and a little dull. And these are my favorite scissors for applique. They're Karen K. Buckley scissors. You can find them at leahday.com/scissors. But they are getting a little sticky, and I have found that if you take just a little alcohol wipe, you can rub that off. It's just an alcohol-based glue. The fusible, like that residue that we get from the fusible web will come right off. So please don't feel like your scissors are ruined or they'll never be the same again. You can get them back to working again just fine. So I think at this stage it might be time for a good scissor clean, but I can at least trim up this piece. And once you cut it and you have it cut along that outer edge, you really want to be gentle with these. The more you bang them around and stuff, the more likely you're going to have some fraying along the edge. So just be gentle. Once you get it cut, put it into a plastic bin, put it somewhere where it's not going to get jostled around and you're not going to lose it. You know, the pieces are getting basically smaller and smaller, and we really want to be gentle with it and minimize the fraying that's going to happen along these edges. But that's it. There we go. That is how I would cut out all of the shapes. You're going to cut right along the line when you have just a single line. Anywhere that you have an extra dash line, remember extra line means extra fabric, you'll extend and leave about 1/4 inch of fabric along that outer edge, including fusible web too. You'll have fusible web and fabric extending beyond that shape outline. So I want you to take your time, do that with all of your pieces, all 33 pieces, except for those lips and eyes. Just leave those the way they are for now. And I'll meet you back here next week as we start constructing our beautiful goddess quilt together.
So that's it for this video. I hope you learned a lot about Fusible Applique and you're ready to get all of your pieces prepped up. Now, this might seem like it's going to take forever, but I promise you, especially if you print directly onto your fusible web sheets, you can put together a goddess quilt in about a day. And that's exactly what I did with this version of Eternal Love. And you can see I used the fabrics from the quilty box I received in May, and that's how I created her beautiful hair and body. And I grabbed some extra fabrics for the background and the baby and her skin tone from my stash. So I put this one together in about, I'd say 8 hours total. So that can kind of give you a little bit of an idea of how long this project's going to take. Now, next week, we're going to start constructing the goddess. So we're going to use all of the information that we put on these pieces, all those hash marks and dash lines and all that good stuff. We're going to be putting that to good use as we construct her body, construct her hair, and put her all together and then fuse her onto the background fabric. So I hope you'll join in the fun and be back next week to see that next part of the Eternal Love Goddess Quilt Along. Now, if you'd like to join in the fun and you're looking for the sign up, we actually don't do our quilt alongs that way. We keep it really simple. All you need is a copy of the quilt pattern. You can find it at leahday.com/eternallove. So it's super simple. Just pick up a copy of the pattern and check in every week as we share new videos on this project. So I hope you'll come and check that out at leahday.com/eternallove. Until next time, let's go quilt.